The lonely father never imagined that an ordinary cup of tea would become the beginning of the greatest responsibility of his life. He had spent years believing that miracles only happened to other people, until 4 frightened little girls wearing identical blue dresses quietly surrounded his small table in the corner of a peaceful cafe. Their tiny hands trembled, their bright eyes searched every corner of the room, and then they leaned closer than strangers ever should. What they silently asked of him would change not only his future, but also expose secrets powerful people had buried for years. In that single unforgettable moment, a man who believed he had already lost everything suddenly became the only hope for 4 innocent children who desperately needed someone to protect them. Before we continue this unforgettable journey, if you believe kindness can change lives, if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks so we can continue bringing you stories that inspire hope and remind us of the power of humanity. The man sitting alone near the cafe window was 36 years old. His simple gray shirt had faded after years of washing, his dark blue jeans showed signs of careful repairs, and his worn brown boots carried the dust of endless construction sites. His short black hair was neatly trimmed even though he had little reason to impress anyone anymore, and the faint lines around his calm brown eyes revealed years of carrying burdens without complaint. His name hardly mattered to the people rushing past him each morning. To them, he was just another hard-working single father trying to survive another difficult day. Yet inside his quiet heart lived memories that refused to fade. 3 years earlier his wife had passed away after a sudden illness that had emptied not only his savings but also the warmth from his modest home. Since then every sunrise had begun with responsibility instead of hope. Every evening ended with exhaustion instead of rest. He worked long shifts repairing buildings across the city, skipped meals whenever money became tight, and quietly hid every worry from his young son, who believed his father could fix anything. The boy never knew how many nights his father sat alone after bedtime calculating bills beneath a dim kitchen light while wondering whether tomorrow would finally become easier. That afternoon had started like every other. Rain clouds drifted across the city without releasing a single drop. Office workers hurried through crowded streets while expensive cars lined the avenue leading toward the financial district. The small cafe stood between towering glass buildings that reflected wealth few ordinary people could imagine. It was one of the rare places where anyone could sit peacefully without feeling judged, and the lonely father often stopped there whenever he managed to save enough coins for a single cup of tea. He slowly lifted the warm cup, grateful for a few quiet minutes before returning to work. Around him conversations blended with the gentle sound of cups meeting saucers and soft music floating through the air. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until 4 pairs of polished shoes stopped beside his table. He looked up expecting children who had become separated from their parents. Instead he saw 4 identical girls no older than 7 years old. Each wore an elegant blue dress beneath a white cardigan, each had shoulder-length dark hair tied with matching ribbons, and each carried the unmistakable expression of children trying desperately not to cry. Although they appeared perfectly dressed, their frightened eyes revealed a fear no child should ever carry. Without waiting for permission, the girls quietly sat around his small table. One nervously held the edge of her sleeve while another kept glancing toward the cafe entrance. The third tried to comfort the youngest by gently squeezing her hand. Finally, the bravest among them leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper as she pleaded with all the courage she could gather inside such a tiny heart. She asked the lonely father to pretend, just for a little while, that he was their father because someone outside was watching them. For several long seconds he could not understand what he had just heard. His first instinct was to look around for their real parents, but the girls subtly shook their heads before he even moved. Their fear was genuine. Their small shoulders trembled despite the comfortable temperature inside the cafe. Whatever frightened them was real enough to silence childhood itself. He remembered the promise he had made beside his wife's hospital bed years ago, that no frightened child should ever feel alone if he had the strength to help. That promise had guided countless quiet acts of kindness throughout his difficult life, though none had ever seemed as risky as this moment. He knew absolutely nothing about these girls. He did not know their names, where they came from, or why they believed pretending he was their father could save them. Yet he could not ignore the fear reflected in their innocent faces. Instead of asking questions, he calmly smiled as though they truly belonged at his table. He gently moved an empty chair closer and ordered 4 slices of cake, even though doing so meant spending nearly all the money he had planned to use for groceries. The girls looked at him with surprise that slowly transformed into cautious relief. For the first time since approaching him, tiny smiles appeared across their faces. None of them realized that across the street, inside the tallest office tower in the city, one of the country's most powerful businesswomen was about to discover that her beloved quadruplet daughters had disappeared from a private charity event. Within minutes security alarms would sound, executives would abandon important meetings, and helicopters would prepare to search the city. Yet the one person destined to protect those 4 extraordinary children was not a billionaire bodyguard or a famous investigator. He was simply a lonely single father finishing a humble cup of tea, unaware that destiny had quietly invited him into a story far greater than anything he had ever imagined.